One thing about ReZero that makes it unique in comparison to most other anime and isekai out there is the way ReZero is able to tackle the topic of masculinity. More specifically, the dangers of performative and fragile masculinity, and the portrayal this is able to execute through different characters throughout the series. Whether it's Subaru, Garfield, Reinhardt, Wilhelm, we are constantly and consistently getting different portrayals of masculinity throughout all of ReZero. And through these portrayals, ReZero is cumulatively able to illustrate a true meaning of what healthy masculinity is and what that's supposed to look like. And that's exactly what this video will be about today. ReZero and the struggles of masculinity and how it portrays that through the characters throughout the series. If you like content like this and analytical stuff, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and let's get into the video. I want to start with the character who portrays this better than nobody else throughout the series of ReZero, that being the main character, Natsuki Subaru. Something that makes Subaru unique in comparison to most main characters within his medium, we see Subaru initially summoned as an ordinary person in a world full of magic, somebody who's not necessarily special or unique in any sort of way, and is characterized as more or less just an average person. Despite the fact that he is inevitably just a normal average person, we see Subaru, when initially summoned into the ReZero world, put himself on a bit of a pedestal and distinguish himself from the people around him, more or less seeing them as NPCs and video game-like characters based on the media he watched growing up, and automatically giving himself the assumption that he is going to have some sort of special power or importance within this world. This initial and honestly toxic mindset Subaru came into this world with is what sets out the spiral of his performative masculinity that we see within the first couple of arcs. Subaru is a character with a warped perception of masculinity, and within his eyes, masculinity is somebody who is strong and never relies on other people and is able to always progress forward without showing any signs of weakness or emotional faulting. Reinhardt, being the very first male character that we honestly get to see throughout the series of ReZero, is a very good introduction and a foil to Subaru in terms of this aspect. Dynamically speaking, Reinhardt represents everything that Subaru perceives as masculine and a strong person, and is essentially everything Subaru wanted to be when initially summoned into the world. A strong, all-being knight who has good looks, good charm, and can't really lose to anybody. Regardless though, it's this warped perception of masculinity and lack of being vulnerable that is honestly further perpetrated through an ability such as Return by Death, where he's not really able to tell anybody what he's going through, that further propagates Subaru's idea of what it means to be masculine, and what really starts to unfoil his faults as the series progresses. We see Subaru fall down a toxic mindset and path that honestly a lot of men within the real world fall down. Subaru selfishly believes that the sacrifice and pain that he willingly puts himself through with no one else's choice but his own, and pain that Amelia never asked him to do for her, which we see within the very first interaction of the show, should result in some sort of reward and Subaru being able to progress in some sort of way, whether that be romantically or through the world. Obviously, after so much time, this nice guy persona Subaru was putting on with this warped perception of masculinity boils over and inevitably leads to the fallout that we see within episode 13 of season 1, in which Amelia finally confronts Subaru about his selfish acts and the fact that he is essentially not letting her be her own person. Amelia is able to immediately recognize the fact that Subaru is not really doing these things for her, but is rather doing it for himself. She never asked for any of this, and the second that she calls Subaru out on this, Subaru can't handle it and inevitably freaks out. This fake and false identity that Subaru was trying to portray from the very moment he came to the world crashes within on himself, and we see him go through the struggles that we see within arc 3. Now it's to be mentioned a character like Julius. During this arc and during the peak of Subaru's fragile masculinity, that is when he is introduced, and we get a real good glimpse at the type of person Subaru really is underneath. With somebody so good looking and as charming as Julius, the type of person Subaru really is revealed as Subaru gets extremely jealous just by the presence of Julius, in which once again we see Subaru's lack of real trust within Amelia, and the fact that he views her less as a person and more as a tangible item within a game is revealed, where instead of trusting Amelia around Julius, we see Subaru freak out and put himself forward and go on a jealous outrage. Julius is characterized as beautiful, charming, and level-headed, everything Subaru is not in a respectable manner. Furthermore, with the final presence of Julius and Subaru's inevitable fallout with Amelia, this is when it's fully propagated henceforth, Subaru's hero complex that was pushed forward by this fragile masculine idea that he had going into this world. It is to be said that in the beginning of ReZero, Subaru did want to save people, but it was his reasoning behind this savage which his true flaws are shown, in which Subaru wasn't doing this for anybody else, he was doing it for himself. This hero complex that Subaru inevitably develops stems from a deeper issue, a lack of identity that Subaru faced growing up, constantly being compared to his father, looking within his image, who his father can honestly be described as somebody with a peak masculine image within Subaru's eyes. This lack of ego and constant belittling while comparing himself to the people around him such as Julius or Reinhard or even his father, only further propagates this fragile masculinity Subaru has. As he sees all of these characters and people being strong, he believes within his eyes that strength and masculinity comes from not showing weakness, which is honestly the opposite. This only leads to more faults, as when things will inevitably go wrong at times, this only pushes Subaru to the edge and we see him spiral out into a cycle of self-hatred, stemming from the inability to actually express his emotions properly, again, which we see a lot throughout Arc 3, previously mentioned, his conversation with Amelia, in which we see her confront him for him trying to constantly portray his ideas and thoughts onto her. He inevitably freaks out and he goes on a tangent, screaming at her, saying very rude and mean things, when in reality Subaru's not talking about Amelia, but he's talking about himself. Ultimately, it is able to portray that trying to be a savior to the people around you without any form of emotional maturity is just another form of ego. It is to be mentioned that throughout all of ReZero, this need for emotional maturity is constantly reiterated, which we see that only within moments of being emotionally vulnerable do we actually see Subaru progress as a character and the plot progress. Emotional vulnerability and true masculinity go hand in hand. That tough performative masculinity that Subaru tries to portray, especially throughout the first 3 arcs, is thrown away, and this is shown honestly multiple times. The glimpses we see at Subaru being truly masculine and actually opening up as a person is the only time he's able to progress, whether that be in Arc 1 where he calls for Reinhardt's help, Arc 2, where he inevitably stops trying to act perfect and breaks down on Amelia's lap, which leads to Rem and Ram not trying to off him. Or in Arc 3, and what I consider the best example of this, the From Zero speech, in which we finally see Subaru completely open up about his lack of identity and his fragile masculinity, and how this was propagated from how he grew up in the life he had before being isekai to this world. Subaru thrusted into a new life with a new opportunity, tried to form and cultivate a new identity from zero, but without actually changing as a person, we know that this is impossible. Subaru's ability to actually be emotional, vulnerable, break down, and cry is what grows him as a character, and while in most media men crying like this is looked down upon and seen as weak and not masculine, this is actually what is masculine. This portrayal of tears is honestly one of the biggest complaints people have about ReZero, but it's this ability to cry and break down that shows us what true masculinity is. True masculinity stems from vulnerability, the ability to seek help from others, and recognition of your action. Arc 3 with Rem's confrontation of Subaru, or within Arc 4 when Otto confronts Subaru, we see that what ReZero is trying to portray is that true masculinity does not come about from relying on yourself and portraying yourself as this strong, independent person, who has no weaknesses, but rather comes from being emotionally vulnerable and being able to rely on the people around you. It is able to reinforce one of the core themes of ReZero, that growth is only able to come forth from humility. The only time we see Subaru progress throughout the series is when he is able to stop, learn, and rely on the people around him. You're able to develop your character not from yourself, but from the people around you and the experiences you have with those people and the connections you make with them along the way. The portrayal of this growth is only executed and encapsulated within Arc 5, in which we see Subaru finally developed from the first 4 arcs, honestly lacking little flaws at this point within his character, die less times than he has ever died before, and after dying once or twice in the beginning of Arc 5, he immediately tells a character like Beatrice and begins to rely on the people around him. This is inevitably built up for what we see within Arc 6, in which, spoilers ahead, but obviously Subaru loses his memories, in which we get that Arc 1 fragile masculinity ego Subaru thrusted back into the limelight, in which we are compared to the current Subaru and his development and all the things he's able to complete while relying on the people around him, and it's to the point where the Arc 1 Subaru literally can't handle that idea and can't believe it and starts to drive him insane. It's honestly just another play on another person within Subaru's life, such as his father, that he has to be looked up to and has to constantly be compared to. Natsuki Subaru cannot understand the actions of Natsuki Subaru, or how Natsuki Subaru could ever achieve such a thing, because within his eyes, Natsuki Subaru is a low-life nobody without an identity. Somebody who has no real idea of masculinity and has no real idea of the type of person he is or who he wants to be. It's what makes the scene of Subaru a finally fully realized, masculine, healthy Subaru telling this Arc 1 version of Subaru that he's a great guy, an amazing guy per se, that makes it so good. Furthermore, I want to talk about some of the cross-dressing that we see within Arc 7. Subaru's ability to do this and honestly be confident, intelligent, and smart as Natsumi Schwartz, another alternative identity of himself, really just goes to illustrate that growth that he's had throughout the series. Illustrating that Subaru really does value the women within his life and the strengths around them, and he has no shame in dressing up as one. He is able to be confident and smart and intelligent in this Natsumi Schwartz persona. In my opinion, Subaru is honestly the best portrayal of what real masculinity is throughout all of media, but it's safe to say he's not the only character who tackles this idea. We see other characters within the series, such as Wilhelm and Garfield, portray very interesting ideas of what masculinity really is. Somebody such as Wilhelm has always been stoic throughout his life, and is honestly a good representation in the opposite sense of Subaru of what can go wrong with masculinity. Wilhelm's warped idea of masculinity led him to a very painful life. Honestly, this toxic ideals that Wilhelm propagated from a young age is what led the Estrella family a bit astray. Wilhelm's stoicness led to Heinkel having a very interesting upbringing. This inability for Wilhelm to actually open up, cry, and be sad around the people he loved led to his loved one, his most cherished one within his life, Theresia, dying before he could even do anything, with his reluctance to even say something such as, "I love you." Now we have all the Estrella drama that is going on within the ReZero world. It just further goes to show that this idea of being so self-warped and not relying on the people around you and not opening up to your loved ones is such a bad, toxic, masculine idea. Furthermore, with a character like Garfield, who I think has inevitably became one of the most healthy representations of masculinity throughout ReZero. Starting off as somebody who is emotionally and literally cut off from the outside world, Garfield starts off as a very brute and rude character, to say the least. But again, through growth by relying on the people around him within Arc 4, we see Garfield make a complete 180 and become a very different person while still being a great representation of what it means to be a strong man. His scenes with Mimi within Arc 5 are honestly amazing and shows that, even the strongest men within ReZero, it's okay to break down and cry sometimes and rely on the people around you if you're going through something. Instead of holding that all in by himself, he is able to break down and really get something off his back that most wouldn't be able to get through. There are honestly so many male characters within ReZero who are amazing representations of masculinity and growth that's come from that, and also toxic masculinity, as a lot of these characters had warped ideas of what it really meant to be a good masculine man. Ultimately, ReZero is able to portray that being a man and being masculine doesn't come from anything on the outside, such as being strong or stoic or cutting yourself off from the world and showing no weaknesses. Altogether, true masculinity is derived from being able to understand yourself while also being able to empathize and love the people around you. And most importantly, it stems from that ability to grow, your ability to recognize your wrongs and listen to the people around you. Have an open ear. Don't propagate your own ideas onto those around you, and be able to put yourself in their shoes. I feel like ReZero portrays a very good message where in a real world where masculinity is constantly being questioned and derived, and the overall idea of what it means to be a man is being warped, ReZero stands out. And this series is a great reminder that your strength doesn't come from you sitting in silence, but rather comes from being able to open up and connect with people around you. Altogether, you gotta love yourself. That's what ReZero claims it means to truly be masculine. Subaru begins his journey as a fool pretending to be a hero, but through understanding and empathizing with the people around him and recognizing his own faults, Subaru is able to become that hero. He is able to love himself, as we all should. But yeah, what do you guys think? I love ReZero. I think it portrays this masculine idea better than most series out there, and is honestly something that's very important within the world now today. Whether it be through interesting forms of media, gym, all that type of stuff, I feel like the idea of what it means to be masculine has been warped a bit, and people feel like you can't show your true self and be honest with who you are. But without being honest with who you are deep down inside, you're always going to have a warped and false identity, and your inability to embrace who you truly are as a person is just going to inevitably lead you astray. But what do you guys think? Make sure you like and subscribe. I love ReZero, you love ReZero, and peace.